Robinson. Unfortunately not here at HUD headquarters because we couldn't find a room to do it because it's so popular these days to have these rooms. So, but anyway, wanted to spend some time with you all today to talk about the RPCAs. And while this has been billed as a refresher for transaction managers, what I really think it is, it's more of a what do I do with the PCA that comes in at the financing plan. We have trainings on the resource desk that cover the review of the PCA and the back and forth that should go on between the transaction managers and the PHA when you're reviewing the drafts of the PCA and all of that sort of thing. But there have been some questions about what do I do when I have a PCA that's been quote-unquote approved and the contractor's finished with everything, and now I'm reviewing it as part of the financing plan. What should I do? What should I look at? And that sort of thing. So wanted to spend some time today going through that, and I also wanted to take questions as needed as people wanted things. So anyway, we've got, as everyone will remember, we've got the GoToWebinar that lets people raise their hand when they have questions. You have to have called in with your phone and use the audio pin to make that work. So hopefully everybody has done that. And from time to time, I will check and see what people's status are and that sort of thing. But I will be watching to see if we have questions. So that's just a reminder on how to do that. There's a raise your hand button here. So hopefully everyone knows how to use that moving forward. So anybody that wants to talk, just raise your hand and I'll call on you. So without further ado, I will jump out of this. I hope I'm jumping out of this. There we go. And I've got the Excel version. So there are a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. Again, this is a PCA that you hopefully have already seen because you and the PHA worked through the drafts with the PCA contractor. And you're happy with generally what was going on and generally what they were replacing. And what's happened now is the PHA has decided what they're going to do in rehab, what they're going to do in the 20-year schedule. They've selected the items that they want to replace. Maybe they've even, dare I say, gotten some better bids and put some pricing in. But all of that is not particularly critical as long as they've done a few very important things to make the tool work properly for the financing plan. And so I have 4 items that I think everybody needs to be checking when a PCA comes in for the financing plan. The first and most important one is on the global input page, making sure that somebody has put in where the funding sources for the money for what's going to be done in rehab is coming in. Okay? I'm going to show you why that's important in just a second, but I do want to kind of give you a quick primer on what happens here. So if I select this, you'll see that there's a drop-down box that comes up that gives all variety of sources of funds. You don't have to have all of the ones that you're using listed here. You can, but what you have to do is make sure that the amount that's entered in the dollar amount here meets or exceeds the amount of rehab that's being done. Okay? Out of the box, the summary description over here is populated by with whatever you select in the funding sources. So if I select, I'm not going to do it yet because I want to show you the issue, but we'll come back to this. But you'll see once I select something here, the source will come over. So you're saying, why is this so important? This is very important because item number 2 that everyone should be doing when they're doing the review here is to make sure that the amount in rehab matches the various places that rehab shows up throughout the tool. First and foremost on the rehab escrow needs page. So now I've gone to the rehab escrow needs page, and you will see that in this particular case, the total amount of rehab is listed here as $720,000 with a contingency of $144 for a total of $864,000. Okay? 4 places, all with zeros, are pulling the exact same numbers. So you're wondering, why is it doing that? And those of you that have been through this know the answer. The answer is, since there's no funding source, the tool has generated the 4 defaults and is quadruple counting the rehab needs on this property. So if you're putting a financing plan together as a PHA and you're overlooking at this number, you've inflated what you need to do by 4 times. Okay? This is a common mistake that we've seen multiple times, and all that needs to be done is this quick check and quick solution. So here right now we see that there are 4 items. I'll now go back to the global input page, and I'll say that the PHA is going to take out a new first mortgage, and that new first mortgage is going to be in the amount of $500,000, say. The fatal errors, as you've been watching, the fatal errors are going away. There have been fatal flags so that everybody knows that there's a problem here. I'm going to undo that just so you see the fatal flag here, right? When I put in an amount that exceeds the necessary funding, that fatal error goes away. Now, more importantly, when I go to the Rehab Escrow Needs page, ta-da, I now only have $180,000 of needs with a contingency of $36,000 and a total of $216,000. These other ones are blank because there are no other sources of funds that are paying. There's no excess amount. In fact, we only needed a mortgage of $216,136 to pay for this. We far exceeded that, so that's not a problem. But that is critical because my next item for everyone to look at is this number needs to match what's happening on the various places that this shows. So I'm scrolling now, I'm looking at the 20-year schedule, and I'm scrolling down to the bottom to look at our total needs in rehab. Again, everyone remembers that column B here, which is the rehab number, this is the amount of money, these are the items that are being selected to be done in rehab, not in year 1 of the 20-year schedule. So if I've selected to do this in rehab, that's what this is showing up. If I've decided as a PHA that I don't actually want to replace the refrigerators, for example, in rehab, and I want to put them in the 20-year schedule and spread them over years 1, 2, and 3, I can do that. But I have to select end of cycle in the cap needs input page to do that. So that will make the money move from column B to column D. But from you, from a review standpoint, and the transaction manager reviewing this PCA, this number, $180,000, should be the same number, the $180,000 that's showing up on here. And one more place for everyone to look, the rehab specifications page. This is the page that's being used to generate the, for mark-to-market folks, the Exhibit A. I'm not entirely sure. I don't remember exactly what we call it in RAD, but this is what generates the exhibits of the RCC that shows what work's being done. Again, right here, $180,000. That number needs to be the same in all 3 places. Okay? So that's a check. That's my number 2 on my list of 4 things for transaction managers to check when they're looking at a PCA submitted for the financing plan stage. Can you look at this when you're reviewing a PCA at the 90-day milestone? Absolutely you can. But it's not critical at that stage because the PCA contractor is not responsible for those items to be matching. The PHA is. Okay? So those are my kind of first 2 items. The last 2 are more what generated this call. There's been a fair amount of confusion amongst a number of folks about how the reserve schedules are being set up and how the IDRR and how the ADRR are established, what's going in these numbers, how are those manipulated, and the like. So there are 2 parts to this one. So in my list of 4 things that I want you to review, these are numbers 3 and 4, but they're kind of tied hand in hand. The first of this is just what I call a sanity check. And so for the sanity check, what I would like all transaction managers to take a look at is what are the total needs for this property over 20 years, because that's what I'm going to be reserving to pay for. Okay? So if I scroll over here and I see that this property has 20-year needs of $806,000, inflated at just under $1 million. That's what the property is going to have to spend over the next 20 years to maintain the level that this PCA contractor has said is acceptable. Okay? So if I go to the reserve 20-year schedule and I look at how much money the PCA contractor, or the PHA in this case, since this is its financing plan, is recommending to put into their reserve for replacement account, their initial deposit, followed by annual deposits. Just from a logic test, if I'm only going to spend inflated just under $1 million over 20 years, putting $700,000 into a reserve account that's going to sit there for 20 years is far in excess of what needs to happen. What the PCA contractor has done here and what the PHA has done is they've geared off of this section right here in row 21 that says my reserves are adequate each year. So they have not fine-tuned this tool to find the optimal amount for both an IDRR and an ADRR. Okay? So if I look here and I scroll out to year 20, this property is going to have in year 20 $500,000 worth of reserves, which is an awful lot of money for a 40-unit property. In fact, it is just under $14,000 a unit, which is far in excess of what anybody would think would be a required amount or even an acceptable amount. So when I'm looking at this from a transaction manager standpoint, this has jumped out as something that needs to be fine-tuned, and we're going to walk through that fine-tuning in just a second. The other thing that's happening on this is the ADRR is less than what the recommended amount is. Out of the box, so the default values for the tool provide for $1,000 a unit. That may or may not be correct. And in fact, all of the guidance that's been provided to the industry and to the PHAs and the transaction managers is actually to follow the new MAP guidance of 5% of the uninflated 20-year needs of the property. Okay? And so what I would do if I was a PCA contractor, I would go to the global input page, and this is where this is all driven. Here's our reserve floor. And it's fairly simple to put in a formula for this. Since I happen to know the $806,000, I won't need to reference any pages, but I can just simply put in a formula that takes 5% of the 20-year needs of the property divided by the 40 units of the property. And I have now set the reserve floor at $1,008. So out of the box, the default value is 1,000, and coincidentally, shall we say, the 20-year needs of the property at 5% divided by the units comes at just over $1,000. So, you know, if you're fine-tuning this, and the RAD policy is you can use the lesser of, you could use $1,000 here. But for the example that I'm going to work through right now, I'm going to go ahead and leave this 1,008 as our floor, since that is really the HUD's preferred solution here, is to use the MAP guidance for that. Okay? So now that I have a value here, that's going to make this section here, these various flags, that comes through as what the recommended amount is. The flags are here. Again, just as a reminder, this is not a fatal flag. The RAD policy is to be able to apply some reason to this and to be able to manipulate those numbers to make sure that, for example, what's happening right now doesn't necessarily happen. For $13,000 a unit ending balance, which is way higher than anybody would want, certainly a lower annual deposit would make sense. But I would argue that the better thing to do is to reduce the initial deposit, which I'm going to do in a second. But just for sake of argument, let's go ahead and put in the amount that's the quote-unquote program requirement. That now makes our flag over here to the left go away, and we're now okay. Now, of course, we've now got almost $30,000 a unit in reserves here, so we're still way ahead of what we want to do. But what we would like to do now is fine-tune this. So $961,000 over 20 years. Let's just say that we can reserve less than half of that and get away with the number. So let's go ahead and put in $400,000 in this cell. And $400,000, again, adequate in each year. This is the key row that I'm looking at when I'm fine-tuning this. I don't need to scroll back and forth. I can use this line and this line below here, the $18,000 a unit, and the reserves are adequate in each year to manipulate this. So obviously still way more than I need to have in my ending balance, and the reserves are adequate each year, so I can come down even more than that. So let's just see if we can go to $300,000. $300,000 with $40,000 a year going into this property. $300,000 IDR is still plenty of money to go in. So let's try 200. Now we have the floor violation. So now this has changed from being adequate in every year to being inadequate in one of the 20 years. It doesn't tell you exactly which one it is, but luckily we don't have to scroll over to see that here's where that happens in year 5. We didn't actually go negative, which is a good thing, and the next year we jumped right back up. So this is not a what anybody would consider to be a critical violation. But again, we're still at $12,000 a unit after 20 years. So in looking at what this property is doing and kind of getting a feel for these numbers, clearly the issue is we're over-reserving on an annual basis, not so much on the IDRR. While I could probably keep cutting the IDRR down, I'm betting that based on the fact that I've got reserve draws in these early years, I'm going to need to put some money aside anyway. So let's leave the $200,000 for a minute, and let's now start manipulating the annual deposit and see if that gets us closer to where we want to be. So just for fun, let's kick it in half. Let's do $20,000. Okay. Now that blows everything up. So we've had a nice opportunity to see all of our flags and all of our alerts. We're now under $1,000 at the ending balance. We've violated our minimum balances. We've violated 9 of 20 years. That's just a real disaster. So that number doesn't work at all. So let's split the difference and go with $30,000. Okay. Now, minimum balance is under what we want. Okay. We've got a floor violation. We've got 2 floor violations from here, one of which the balance actually goes negative, which we never would like to see. So it looks like we're getting closer, but we want that negative to go away. So let's see what happens if we go to 32,500. Still negative in year 5, which we don't want. To 35. Still negative. Let's go to 36. Okay. So now the situation is such that we have a floor violation in year 5, which is a little bit tight, but it is year 5. If this floor violation, if we were getting a $5,000 balance out in year 15 or 20, that would probably be a bigger problem for us than in year 5. We probably may want to consider raising that, but it's within a range. Now we're seeing that we have the minimum balance at under $500 a unit at the end of the 20-year schedule. So let me scroll out here and see exactly what our numbers are looking like. Whoops. Mouse problem here. There we go. All right. All right, let's scroll over here and take a look at what we got going on in year 20. So year 20 is not, it's not looking that bad. While it is certainly less than the recommended amount, it's not so much that we wouldn't potentially consider that. So I think that you could make an argument that this number isn't terrible. If you don't like the flags and if you're concerned about all those, you could certainly raise it up a little bit more and make these all eliminate. But I think that within reason we're okay. So I've got a hand up. I've got my friend Barbara Listokin in New York, and so Barbara, what do you got for us?
The situation here is caused by the fact that the required repairs are spread so unevenly. So year 5 has 180,000 in needs, while year 6 has 0. If you would just spread those two like equally, you wouldn't have any of these issues.
That's a great point, Barbara, and that's something that you're absolutely right. There are a number of ways to skin this cat. One of the assumptions that I was going with for just this example for this discussion today was that fine-tuning had been done by the PHA already, and that you're reviewing it as a transaction manager and just looking for red flags in your mind of what you would look at. So you're absolutely right that there are a number of solutions to this. The one that I walked through is one. The one that you just described is another. Absolutely, you could spread the costs across multiple years. If those $180,000 included all of the refrigerators and all of the kitchen cabinets and all of the countertops all in 1 year, spread it over 3 years, and that would certainly solve the problem. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
The second point is that the ending balance in year 20 is close to 10,000 a unit, not 1,000 a unit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to look and see why my minimum ending balance flag is coming up. You're exactly right. Thank you for that. I'm going to see why that's flagging that, Barbara. Thank you. All right. Anything else, Barbara, before I move on to someone else? Thank you. Lisa, what can we do for you?
I was just wondering what that formula was you put into the global endpoint. 5% of what?
Uninflated cost.
The 5% is the uninflated cost. So if I go to my 20-year schedule, okay, so it's 5% of the total uninflated costs over 20 years. So this number right here, okay. 806, 860, 896.
5% of the uninflated. Thank you.
Right. Okay. All right. Greg, you're on. Greg, you there?
Oh, sorry, I had mute on. So that 20-year uninflated cost, that is of the needs that exclusive of what you're doing in initial repairs?
That's correct.
Okay, so another way for this PHA to solve the problem of trying to get the numbers down a little bit is if they do have some resources to take care of some repairs now, that it will reduce the 20-year schedule and therefore reduce the overall initial and for our deposit. Correct?
Very good point. Yes. So if you did more of the work in rehab and not in the 20-year schedule, that would also solve this problem. So let's see if
yep. Go ahead.
Let's just see if this one. So if I am looking at this mouse here, I scroll back over here, and so say for example they decide instead of doing so they got $180,000 in rehab now and $181,000 or $182,000 in year 1. So if they did $360,000 in they would have much less. They'd have $182,000 less of costs over the 20 years.
Right. Right. And this is my own sort of simple math to the extent that it's helpful for others, that if a PHAs end up doing the rehab to really get the property up to speed today, and so therefore it has no more sort of backlog need and is just doing accrual need, that that very often you see in state HFAs or whatever that someone may required to put a deposit of $250 per unit per month or $350 per unit per year or $350 per unit per year in a replacement reserve deposit. Well, $350 over the course of 20 years is about $7,000 a unit. So when you see someone who has needs over 20 years after the rehab is done of about $7,000 a unit, then that's sort of like, oh, I've done substantial renovation, and then 5% of that just happens to be equal to 1 year's worth of annual reserve deposits. So,
Right.
A property that has been pretty substantially rehabbed, don't be surprised to see that the annual deposit not to be the $1,000 number that you see here, but something closer to the $350 number or something like that.
Absolutely. Very good point, Greg. Yes, very good point. Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything else, Greg?
I'll have some follow-up ones. I'll let others ask some questions. I'll come back on one or two other things. Yeah.
I'll tell you, I'm just going to leave you live. I'm just going to leave
Okay.
you unmuted, okay?
Okay, thanks.
So I've got Jen Cryer. Let me open up the line for Jen. Hold on, Jen. Oh, Jen, you haven't entered your PIN in, so you need to.
So while she's entering her PIN, let me ask a follow-up question then.
Sure.
So Robert, as you explained that there was one particular year where one of the examples where it was below the floor, and like just right here, and that was only one of the 20 years was below the floor. So what's been our practice with saying that this is not a hard and fast? So what would be acceptable? Is this okay here? Would it have been okay if it was actually negative for 1,000 or 2,000? To say how much room does the TM have to when there's one particular year when it's low or even negative, but the other years it builds back up?
That's a great question. So in my experience, negative is never acceptable. Can't go negative. And I think that, and Barbara would be another good person to talk about this because she's got tons of underwriting experience. For me, the $5,000 number would be acceptable, knowing the fact that you're putting another amount in. And as she pointed out earlier, year 19, I don't have any withdrawals the following year, so I'm actually getting to build up a double dip here. So if it was more evenly spread, then the floor violations would be more evenly spread. And so I don't think you would necessarily see the 152 balance in year 4, followed by a $5,000 balance in year 5, followed by a 46 and 90 balances the years after that. So I think that if you did what she talked about and leveled it out a little bit, then the floor would kind of be, that'd be a self-fulfilling prophecy. But the key with that is you should never let it go negative.
Okay. So let me just so in this particular example in year 5. So you shouldn't have it go negative, but it's reasonable to then for PHA. Another thing to say is, well, maybe the vendor came back and said, what that item is in year 5 is I'm replacing all the cabinets, and that's a $187,000 hit. But PHA may reasonably say to the vendor or say, well, wait a second, what if I do a third in year 4 and a third in year 5 and a third in year 6? They're not precisely all going to blow in the same year. Is that acceptable?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep, that would be a way to solve that. Yep. So Jen looks like she's got her PIN put in, and I'm unmuting you. Jen?
Hi, thank you.
No problem.
I wanted to go back to the 5% of the uninflated 20-year needs, please, and if you wouldn't mind going to the 20-year schedule page, please.
Sure.
That's what my question is. You were using the total, I believe, on line Z102, that cell.
Mm-hmm.
But then when Greg was on, he mentioned that percentage only being of the needs in years 1 through 20, not rehab. Can you clarify?
Very good point. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. You're right. It's the one. It's column X. You're exactly right, Jen. Thank you for catching me on that.
No,
yes.
No,
Yep.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yep, exactly right. Exactly right. Anything else, Jen?
That's all. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome. All right, so Jen's my last hand raise. Greg, you're still on unmute if you had something else. Anybody else have anything they would like to ask?
How much does the TMs think that the PCA providers really understand the interplay between the IDRR, the annual deposit, and sort of spreading of stuff? Is this sort of, I presume the guild groups and the EMGs and the Dominions know how to do this. What about the others? Are they up to speed on this?
So I would say, so it just generally answering for the TMs that I've talked to, I would say that is not a universally understood. While the training is out there for them to look at, I don't think all of them are getting it. Which is, again, goes back to one of the things that I know has been stressed throughout the development of this program is involving the HUD transaction managers when those draft PCAs come in, because you do have a fair number of people with a lot of experience, and certainly the team leads have the experience to know how this works, and they can help manipulate that going forward. So, I don't know. Others can raise their hand if they want to chime in on that, but that's kind of been my experience. I've got Will with a question.
Hey.
Will.
With respect to the balance floor, the replacement for reserve balance floor in the calculation, is that something that can be reprogrammed into the tool so that it's not something that, you made a comment earlier, if you were the PCA contractor, you would just do, that. Make the formula as part of the cell. Is that something we can just kind of do and put out there as the,
So we do have we do have that included in another update. We just have not done another update for this.
Right.
To it. So yeah, it is in the next version, Will. So it's a great question, a great point.
Thanks.
It's just a matter of when we decide to release that next version. It's probably going to be sooner rather than later because I know there's a different version that we want to put out there for the non-FHA tax credit fast track. So we'll probably be doing a new revision of this generally in the next month. So good point. And I think you're absolutely right. That's the thing that we should do. And just so everybody's aware, going back to that page, we can put that formula in there, but it will always be, or I would suggest it be, overwritable because there are other reasons why you might want to change it and not make it hard and fast for this.
Is the, on the same point, and sorry if I missed it, if this is old, but the other inputs on this page, like the inflation rates and things like that, are those acceptable to be overwritten? Is it up to the PCA contractor or the PHA to enter in something there, and as long as the TM finds it reasonable, it's fine?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, those can be manipulated. They're generally outside of the program standard, but they can be changed. So absolutely, absolutely. Yep. Will, anything else, or I'm go to the next?
I'm good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Larry, I see that you're trying to ask a question, but you didn't enter your PIN either when you called in, so I can't unmute you. So if you could enter your PIN, I'm happy to. And Greg, we lost you too. So Larry, if you've got a question and you want to type it in, I'm happy to read it out loud, or if you want to, I've resent you your PIN, so if you can enter it, that would be fine. Larry, you're on.
One thing to keep in mind, though, when you go to adjusting the annual deposit, is look at your sources, your cash flow. You can afford out of whack and not have enough debt coverage. You may not have enough.
No doubt.
So sometimes it's better to keep it small and raise your initial deposit at the very beginning because your payment, the amount that increases your mortgage payment is a whole lot less than increasing it every year across the board.
That's a great point. I mean, this goes back to
watch that.
I'm sorry?
You just have to watch that and just keep that in mind.
Yeah, so that's a great point Larry brings up, and again, because we're talking about this at the time of financing plan, so you as the transaction manager are looking at those sorts of things. You're looking at what the pro forma looks like, and you're looking at what the final sources and uses are and that sort of thing. So this number that is put in for the annual deposits, the reserve account, needs to be included in their pro forma, and they need to cash flow based on program standards. So that's a very good point from Larry that does need to happen, absolutely. So thank you, Larry, for that. All right. Looking for any other hand raises or anybody else wants to get in the fray before we wrap this up. Okay. Oh, there's Jen. Hold on, Jen. All right, Jen, what do you got?
Okay, I just typed a couple questions, but I'm not sure that you guys can see them. I was just saying that my experience has also been that the contractors, even the larger firms such as EMG and D3G, either are not fully knowledgeable about the concepts we're covering today, or that knowledge hasn't been extended to all of their staff that completes the Excel tool. In addition, and I have heard this from other TMs, if we provide guidance on not only what we've covered today, but other things such as sticking to the EULs in the Fannie Mae schedule, and all sorts of different types of findings that we consistently come across, we provide those to one staff person, but then the next report that comes along from the same firm has the same issues all over again. It's as though the staff at those firms are not communicating with each other.
Right. Yeah, but I think a lot of firms are using subcontractors as well. Yeah, so that's a very good point. Maybe we should.
So we're having to do, but and I'm sorry, my point was just, that we're having to duplicate our responses, and oftentimes I can copy paste and slightly modify. So I'm trying to be efficient in doing that, but just having to go through the exercise of go back to them again, they take a couple weeks. It just extends the whole process. If we're looking for opportunities to make the process more efficient and timely, I think that's one place.
Right.
And then I also wanted to go to the global input page, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Yep.
Okay, so line 17, the rehab contingency percentage. I know that yours has a first mortgage. I don't know if this is FHA, but it was my understanding that the 20% contingency is only required for FHA transactions, and those with just rehab or new construction could go to 10% per our scope of work. Is that correct?
I think that is correct, Jen, yes.
Okay, that was all. Thank you.
Changeable. Thank you. And Jen, just to kind of, I think that maybe we could put together like a RAD blast of sorts to kind of identify some of these hot button issues. Right?
I think that would be terrific and extremely helpful, so that all of the contractors and PHAs hear from RAD what they're expected to do and how, and it goes to, as you said, all subcontractors and so forth.
Okay, great idea. We will put that in the file and see what we can do about that. Great. Thank you. Jay Wright.
Hello.
Hey, Jay.
Just to to follow up on Jen's comment or make another suggestion. One of the things I do as a technical assistance provider is when those questions come up, I download all the instructions and everything that are on the RAD website, and we'll send that out to the PHA because often they don't know to look there or don't look there. So I will just send all that documentation out there. If there's some Q&A or some specific Q&A or specific updates to that, if we could upload a link right there so that as they're downloading or as I'm assisting housing authorities and getting them the material to send to their contractor, if it were all sort of encapsulated right there, it might be easier. Just a suggestion.
Totally agree. Yep. And there are, as you said, there are instructions and there are trainings posted to the resource desk already about this, and maybe we need to look at that and do another session So when the next version comes out, maybe we can do a session like this for the industry. So
Yeah.
I'll take that under advisement. Thanks, Jay.
All right.
All right, great questions from everybody. Thank you all. So anybody have anything else before we sign off? All right, well, this was very helpful, and thanks for all the questions, and definitely take a lot of this under advisement as far as getting more information out to the PCA contractors. And if things come up as you as transaction managers and expediters and others on the call have issues, please feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to help and walk through with you specific questions that you have. So thanks, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.